understand everyone can hear me now. My name is Matt Charpentier, as Allie had said. Thank you for the introduction, Allie. I am the director here for Patent Analytics, and today we're speaking to outside counsel and going to take a look at the PatentAdvisor tool and how it helps navigate the maze of patent prosecution and look at the data that is available to you. And I'm going to start with a couple of PowerPoint slides, and I have this as a backup, but we're going to log right into the software and be able to go through some live things in the software today for everybody. And then there will be phone numbers, contact information at the end. And as Allie said, if you have any questions, feel free to chat those to her by opening your chat box, or save them for the end, and we will unmute the lines and everyone can ask questions. So let's get started. When I look at, first of all, why the PatentAdvisor exists and what it's meant to do and how it's going to help companies like yourself, first I want to start at state of the USPTO. I'm sure that this is all something that everyone understands already, but when I think about the state of the USPTO, we did a study about a year ago, and what this study represents, and I realize it's hard to see the numbers here on my print screen, but this was a large poster we created, and it was pending RCEs by art unit. So each circle is an art unit. The size and color of the circle is how many RCEs are pending in that particular art unit. And each piece of the pie is a text center. And, you know, you can obviously see that if you were in one of the art units in these smaller yellow circles versus one of these larger, darker circles, you might be waiting 3 or 4 months for that RCE to be picked up, or you may be waiting 3 or 4 years for that RCE to be picked up. So and the whole point of this study was for us to just take one data point and take a look at that and consider the tremendous variability inside the patent office. And being able to understand the statistics all the way down to the particular examiner it can be very important to help make business decisions, to help set the expectations of your client, and help see strategies for different paths to allowance. And I give you for example to get us started here. If you had an application that you were working for one of your clients, and that application you knew was with an examiner who has a 10% allowance rate, and on average takes 4.5 office actions to get to allowance, has a 60% requirement for RCE, and you knew their appeal statistics as well, you'd probably treat that examiner and application with the 10% allowance rating different than if you had an application where you knew the examiner has an 80% allowance, typically allows an application in 1.5 office actions, and doesn't typically require an RCE, and has a very low percentage of the applications that go to appeal. Certainly with that higher allowance examiner, you may want to be very aggressive in pushing for allowance early in the process versus that lower allowance examiner where you are knowing that you're going to go a little bit deeper into prosecution to ever consider getting to allowance. So that tremendous variability is what caused us to create PatentAdvisor, and actually the founder and creator was Chris Holt, who's now joined the LexisNexis team here as his organization was acquired by the LexisNexis Reed Tech Technology team. That's who represents this product today. And the PatentAdvisor platform was created out of Chris spending his last 15 years in patent prosecution, and then being able to really have a challenging group of applications and having a theory that these examiners never allow an application, and then becoming obsessed and compiling all the data that he took from the patent office, the long-term having a relationship with the patent office and therefore also a relationship with Lexis, and ended up becoming part of the LexisNexis Reed Technology team. So that's a little bit of the backdrop here, but let me talk to you a little more about PatentAdvisor and why everyone's here today. So PatentAdvisor data platform is really designed in 3 different ways here for the firm or the outside counsel. And the first way we're going to talk about is client development, really. Whether that's client analysis to present to your client more detailed information, or whether that's client development, meaning I'm going to have more applications from that client, or even new business development of growing your relationships in the marketplace. That'll take us into a conversation around precise prosecution, and we'll look at one application at a time. Let's look at the data that's available to see those paths to allowance, and then we'll kind of talk about looking at the entire portfolio and whether that be client analysis or looking at your own portfolio and understanding if there is risk management issues or anything like that that you want to dig a little bit deeper into. So with that, I'm going to skip this slide. Let me just exit out of here, and I'm going to log into the software here. And here we are. Just close a couple windows. So let's log into the software. So we've logged into the software, and just to give you a quick introduction of what we're going to walk through here. Here's QuickPair. QuickPair is our creation of pair, and allows you to do that basic searching. And we're going to go into the QuickPair record here in a minute. There's patent document search that allows you to search all of the claims, office actions, and responses. So it's a text search of all claims, office actions, and responses, and it allows you to then filter that search further so that it can be of more business value to you. So filtering by maybe assignee or by examiner if you're trying to understand the examiner's rejection, or if someone else's, or if that examiner's allowed a claim in the past that you are trying to get allowed, or allowed something similar, or what do they typically allow. You can always just search by examiner or art unit, and I'll share with you what those statistics look like. But to start out, I said I was going to start out with business development or client analysis, if you will. So let's say that Sandbox is one of your clients, and you want to understand Sandbox a little bit further. You would have taken a data set here and put it into a briefcase. All of these are briefcases that I've created in the past here for different organizations, and taking a look at understanding different data sets here. So I've just opened up one of them, and I can see I have a few tools that I can walk through to understand a little bit more about my client and how I can help my client. You know, maybe it's important for me to just understand a little bit about where that client's doing business, and I want to see the examiners, or, you know, maybe where this client is struggling. So, you know, let's go look at the examiners that are the most challenging for them. So let's look at the allowance rates, and let's look at how far they've gone past the examiner's average. So what's important is to understand your examiner and understand specifically what are that examiner's averages or timelines. So in this situation, I'm looking at office actions going past the examiner's average for my client Sandbox here, and I can see that there's there's 4 applications that have gone 2 or more office actions past average. And what I mean by that is, where is the average prosecution time to allowance? So at how many office actions do they typically allow? And I want to understand a little bit more about that client, and I want to understand more about some of their applications, and maybe where I can help them, because I've had some success with these examiners, or maybe I know I've had success with an examiner here in this list, and I know them well, and I want to be able to share with them some success I've had based on an application that is with this Sandbox company that I'm trying to gain access to. So I learned a little bit about my client, but that's really just starting to scratch the surface on my client. If I really want to do a deeper dive to my client here, I'm going to go to, I got to move that, sorry. It doesn't allow me to open multiple windows there. But I'm going to go, and I want to see, from a business standpoint, I want to see how do I do versus my clients. So I would first understand my own statistics. And then I would want to be able to explain to my clients that I've been able to do work in art units 3763, 3766, 3738. These have been art units I'm familiar with, and they happen to be art units that this data set has some applications in for us to take a look at. And so I'm creating what we call an alignment report. And really what that means is, how does the corporation align with what's happening inside the patent office? So let's look here. So we're in art unit 3763, if you look in the bottom left of my alignment report here. And these are the art units I just chose at random here when I looked at the data. And I can see this is how that entire art unit performs. So that entire art unit has a 68.2% allowance rate. And my Sandbox Corporation here has an 84.4% allowance rate. So they've done very well. They've done that with a little higher percentage RCE than typical inside that art unit. So this, again, is art unit 3763. This is my Sandbox Corporation. And you can see that 9% of the time they appealed versus 7.6% of the time. And it really gets into a deep dive into statistics, like the number of times an examiner issued a notice of allowance in response to amendment after final, or number of abandoned apps with clear signs that an interview was conducted. So, how often is it abandoned or allowed out of interview? We'll explore these statistics here in a minute. And then how many applications were there. And I could look at it and say, you know what, I do work in, see if we find one here that is very average. So in 3738, the corporation really matches or is in alignment with what's happening inside that argument. And so maybe in 3738, I know that my firm or myself personally, that I personally have an allowance rate of 75%. And my RCE percentage is much lower than what the average is. So I've got to allowance in less time or less office actions. And maybe I've done that with a less percentage of appeal. And maybe you wanted to understand that level as well. So, it's important for me to be able to look at this for my corporation, but I also want to see a little bit deeper dive here for how my corporation is doing. So I did set up a second alignment report here that just goes a little bit deeper. In this alignment report, what I did is I asked it to then compare how the client was doing. So let's look at these same art units. I think I picked the first three. So just pick those. I generated. It's going to, again, kick us out in an Excel file here so we can do some further analysis on that. But what it's going to allow me now to do is I chose to go a layer deeper. And I wanted to look at their top handful of law firms here. Now, obviously, I've updated the names here for my sample database here, but I can see how these different law firms are doing and maybe compare how I'm doing. Maybe I want to compare how I'm doing versus this inside practice group and at least be able to have a reasonable conversation with the client that says, hey, I've studied this and I've seen how everyone's doing, or I want to see how I'm doing versus my peer set. So I could, maybe I am Delta Echo Foxtrot versus inside practice group. And you know what? I've got 100% allowance. Now I'm going to guess that they only have a handful of applications here. Yes. So only 11 applications, 3 were granted and 8 are still pending. Versus this inside practice group that had 72 granted, 34 abandoned. And, maybe my client's working on, looking for fastest path to allowance and is looking at the percentage of time of RCs and looking at what's happening here. So Kennedy Thomas is saying, hey, only 5.6% of the time we have an RC, I haven't had to appeal, and my allowance rate's been 100%. Certainly want to couch all of that data and analysis here with how many are in each of the categories, but being able to just have a few clicks and being able to understand that client that I'm going to present to, understand historically how they've done, and I can get all the way down to the examiners. So when I was running these, I could have selected examiners, and I could go as high level as the tech center. So I can choose to go tech center groups. I just chose art units here, and you can see how many, the number is representative of how many applications are in each of those. So I could see with Matthew DeSanto, they had 33 applications, and I could see how they're doing with Matthew DeSanto as well. Where it becomes very powerful for our clients and our tools is our clients and our firms that we work with are when they continue to apply even a deeper level of metadata. So maybe they want to apply business unit segments, or they want to apply specific internal managing counsel or external counsel managing. Then they can do those reports all the way down to that level. And so when I'm looking at that data, I can create any data set. I can create any briefcase. I can just come down here and tell it I want to create a new briefcase. And a briefcase is just a set of applications. So I want to look at a set of applications for my organization. So first, when we go through implementation, we always create your organization. So let's say you were RealD. We would create a data set of yours, and we would look at the alignment reports so that you can understand your statistics and understand what data points you do want to share with your clients, and maybe what data points internally you're going to continue to work on and understand. So let's take this a step deeper, though. So we've looked at the alignment report now, and we've kind of looked at this from a business development standpoint. My point was to try to give you an overview of understanding your own data and then understanding that in context with maybe your client or a potential client that you want to work with. And that's what we did here with the alignment report. But let's get to know our own data a little bit further here. Let's say Sandbox is us as a law firm here. So Sandbox was all of the applications that we put in. I'm going to introduce you to this dashboard because the dashboard is the data set, the statistics of all the applications in that briefcase. So again, we're looking at all the applications in briefcase. And we can filter that down. I talked about these metadata filters, so to a client it might be important to look at different product categories, or maybe what firm's managing or what attorney's managing it, or internal or external counsel. Really, the sky's the limit on how we want to filter. That's just data that's been added to our data from the Patent Office and from public pairs. So we're taking all the public applications, continuously updating those so that we can help our clients see statistically what's happening and see the entire context of the Patent Office versus looking at one application at a time. That's certainly your role, is to look at that application and continue to manage that quality. But what I want to do is give you the tools to see how everyone else is working with that examiner. Is that examiner treating you differently? Is there a different process? Is there a different path to allowance? So here's a breakdown, and maybe I just want to look at the trend of patented applications in this data set, or are we abandoning more applications? You know, what's the situation? I can certainly toggle on and off any of those. And this is my filing year. I can look at the alternative view and look at the year something was patented or abandoned as well. So this is applications in 2009 that were abandoned versus I could look at any application you abandoned in, say, 2012, right? The rejection specific statistics, so just after things like the non-final office action here, it says 37.4% of the time there was a 1 or 2 rejection. So looking at what's happening with those applications. And then we get into these prosecution statistics. So things like looking at how frequently is there an RCE filed, how frequently is a second RCE filed. So you can see 160 of these 526, or 30.4% of the time, there's an RCE. And in any of these, so I can switch from patented abandoned to just looking at the abandoned or just looking at the patented ones. And I can always look at a year-over-year breakdown as well. So I can see, is my trend growing or shrinking here year over year? Looks like 2010, and on down here as I look at that year-over-year trend of what's happening. Let's point out a few more of the statistics here to familiarize you with the dashboard. Things like the average time. So it takes 2.5 office actions from filing date to either issuance here, and seeing what's happening in that. What's the longest, shortest. Here's the interview statistics. So looking at this, and imagine you're looking at this now just on one examiner who's working on your application. We'll take a look at that in a minute here, but you can see your personal statistics. It says, look, we've done 374 interviews where we filed the interview summary, and the allowance in 147 of them. So what's that, about a third, maybe a quarter of them, right? A third of them, 147 of 374, and you can see what's happened, the next significant event after interview. So imagine if you're looking at an examiner and it shows you that, 10, 20% of them have been interviewed, but let's say that's 35 interviews and 20 of them went to allowance. A high percentage, over 50% of them go to allowance out of interview, seeing that as a good path to allowance versus an examiner who has that same 30 interviews but only has 5 go to allowance out of interview, knowing that may not be my shortest path or easiest path to allowance. Digging deep into the appeal statistics, looking at, what happens out of pre-appeal, you can see what we count as a win or a loss. This is hyperlinked to all the applications that would be in that category. So I can see here that, 40 times it exited at pre-appeal, and I can see what happened. I got sent back to prosecution. There was 13 allowances out of the 40. So what's that, a fourth of them, 25, just over 25% of them were allowed. Interesting, especially with real low allowance examiners. I don't see them get past this applicant, when the applicants filed the brief, but the examiner hasn't filed a reply yet. A lot of times you see them push them back out into prosecution here. But in this situation, right, almost half of them were allowed. And you can see when it does go to the board what happens, and then how I just summarize it, how many wins, how many losses. If I was going to file an RC, how quickly are they getting picked up? What's happening here. It looks like, several of them are taking a long time. I can see what's happening here. There's still one pending from 2011. This may be where I'm doing my personal analysis. If I see multiple applications still pending from 10, 11, and 12, I'm looking at what's happening. What's happening with these applications. Maybe I need to get back with the examiner and figure out why have they been pending for so long, and is that normal for that examiner. Any data set that I look at will have my table of examiners. I can sort it out. Maybe I want to look at what are my most challenging examiners. And here's a challenging examiner. I have 5 applications with this examiner who only has a 13.8% allowance rate. I can see how I'm doing with that examiner, but just looking at this, I may want to make sure I understood this examiner further and could see if there were better paths to allowance. Again, a data set of all of the art units. And then in any data set, you do have all the applications, and it allows you to quickly be able to export those applications if there is some further analysis that you want to do. You know, maybe I just want to quickly see all the applications and I want to dig a little bit deeper. So I just tell it to export. It's going to drop into an Excel file for me, and when I can open up that Excel file and take a look at that application set and do some more analysis. Maybe I just want to look at my pending applications and I want to see, you know, my pending applications by status. And look at that data set. So I did hit export there quickly and take a look here. Maybe now I can quickly see all my examiners and my examiner's allowance rate that's in this data set. Sort it by Excel. Maybe I'm more comfortable operating from that standpoint, and so I want to dig into it from an Excel standpoint. So now that we've become a little more familiar with the dashboard, let's just jump back into a briefcase here for Sandbox and talk through some of the additional tools that are available. We'll now pick an application and be able to dig a little bit deeper into that application. Oh, sorry. Too many clicks. Where'd Sandbox go? Here they are. Okay. So I'm going to look at my Sandbox briefcase here, and I'll go back into either that dashboard or visual exploration field, and let's introduce you to, if we just received an office action on an application, I could have looked it up right in QuickPair. I didn't know an application number off the top of my head, so I just want to go grab one out of my Sandbox briefcase here. Let's look at a pending one. Let's go ahead and just look at this one here, 901933 here. So let's say we were just issued, I don't know what's next. I'm not familiar with this application. Oh, I just got kicked off the internet. Let's try that again. See if I can reload my internet. I apologize. 1 second. Okay, I'm hoping everyone can still hear me because I was just kicked out of the internet, so I bet I was kicked out of the application. Allie, can you still hear me?
We can still hear you.
Okay, good. I don't know what happened. Sorry about that. On my side, my internet shut down. It just reloaded. So let me log back into the application. Oh, let's log in with the right password. Okay, and I assume everyone's still seeing my screen. Okay,
yep.
So we're logged in, and I was just going to grab an application and go take a look at that application. So here's one of the applications. Now, I could have, from that first screen, logged into QuickPair that way, but just to give you an introduction here to QuickPair, you see things like the general information on this application. So I happen to randomly pick an application that's assigned to Needs Medtronic here. So here's the image file wrapper. So you see that all the claims, office actions, and responses all have these little text searchable files. I do have PDFs of everything in the file wrapper here, but these little text files note that it is text searchable, so I can search that. We'll talk about patent document search in a minute here. But I can see the transaction history, continuity data, see any assignments. Well, really what I wanted to share with everybody was the timeline here. So if I was looking at application 11818391 here, I could quickly see my examiner's allowance rate is 42.4%. I can see everything that's happened. It looks like there was 3 office actions, an appeal, a couple more office actions, and then an RCE. This RCE has certainly been pending for a while. It was filed April 17th of 2012 here. So we're looking at 2.5 years almost of pendency on that RCE and understanding what's happening there. Now, if I was looking at the application and maybe I wanted to explore the statistics a little bit further of how have other people gotten things allowed with Ryan, the first thing I might do is click on Ryan or click on the art unit, learn more about that. And I'm going to launch into that dashboard view that we just looked at. But I also might click on our tool here, the Prosecution Guidebook, and take a look at some notes that are based on what we see from a statistical standpoint. So the examiner handling this application currently has some cases where RCEs were filed over 2 years ago, still waiting action. If you file a substantive response with an RCE, it's a reasonable possibility the application will go to the end of that line. So understanding that and knowing that when I do file this RCE, if I knew that back here, I knew that it was going to really extend prosecution and that it may be pending for a substantially long time. Maybe I want to ask Ryan back here in year 4, hey, is there a way to get to allowance here without filing this RCE? If I file an RCE, is it really going to stay pending for 3 years? So let's learn a little bit about Ryan here. So here's Ryan. Ryan has 145 applications pending. He's abandoned 136. He's granted 100, so that's how we got to that 48%. I could see, what's the trend been? Well, it looks like he did allow quite a few patents there, and lately has not been allowing a lot of patents. I can see what happens from a rejection standpoint. It looks like after non-final office action here, 17% of the time there was still a 112. Maybe I want to understand how frequently he does require an RCE. So what is the pattern that this examiner typically follows? So what do they typically do? It takes 2.3 office action to get to issuance or abandonment. 19% of the time they've been interviewed. 45 interviews out of 236 applications. And again, I'm looking at the data set that's just patented and abandoned here, but 19% of the time there was an interview, 13 times it went to allowance. So again, looking at that statistic to determine, is this an examiner that I want to maybe have an early interview in when I'm looking at the application? Maybe I'm considering appeal, and I want to see how often does it get resolved with pre-appeal? What happens? How often does the examiner move to allowance? Looks like 0 times to allowance. I pointed this out, I think, when we looked at the data set the first time. Applicants brief, but before the examiner's reply, what happens? What happens if it does go to the board? How have they been allowed with the board? Maybe I want to look at those 3 applications and look what was appealed with that examiner and learn a little bit more about that process. This was the examiner that had a large RCE backlog. Looks like he's pushing a lot of things into RCE, and they're sitting for a substantial amount of time. I want to sort my table here and find out how long things have been sitting. It does look like he's been picking up these older RCEs, so you're probably going to go to the end of the line if you file a substantive RCE. What organizations also have applications in front of this examiner? What are the most common assignees? And again, that table if I want to do more analysis. So I just want to look at his pending applications and what's happening in those pending applications. So that's a little bit of a deeper view from the quick fair standpoint. And looking at the prosecution side of it, I'm going to look at one additional thing here. I'll just jump back to the home screen, and I want to introduce you to the patent document search, which was the tool we talked about. I want to search any phrase that I want to search or any text I want to search. I can search inside of the patent document search. Now, I realize you probably wouldn't search for any phrase, but maybe I want to search for I'm not providing a file like, we're not providing patentable. I'm not giving patentable weight to your non-functional descriptive. So maybe you'd say, I want to understand how often, because maybe your examiner has said, I'm not giving patentable weight to the non-functional descriptive here in this claim set. You would tell it to search any, or maybe you want to search an exact match of those terminology. You're going to get into patent document search. You're going to see how often that happens, and then you're going to narrow your claims. Or narrow your search. Maybe I just want to see it in office actions that a certain examiner has issued. Maybe I want to just see those applications that were pending or patented, or, I get to a point where now I want to see, okay, how has someone successfully worked with this examiner? So I want to see the responses people filed to get past a certain issue with an examiner, and I want to see where it came out patented. And then I run my search again, and it's going to narrow the set to the applications I want to take a look at and learn a little bit more about. So that's what patent document search allows you to do. It allows you to search any exact text or all text into all office actions, claims, and responses. And you can sort it then pending, abandoned, patented, and even filter even deeper into a certain assignee or in a certain art unit or certain examiners if I want to dig a little bit deeper. So the last piece I wanted to show you, you saw earlier in my briefcase, and you've continued to see me blow by this. This is those prosecution patterns that maybe you want to monitor for. So you're looking at a certain client, and you've seen, hey, we've had success once I see this type of pattern. So let me just walk you through that prosecution pattern. So I know that examiners, I want to look for examiners who have a low allowance rate where my only potential success has been a high outcome of appeal. I just come into this prosecution pattern monitor, and I go ahead and create that new monitor. And what I can do is I can look at any set of applications and monitor them for anything that I want to look at happening. So I want to look at, as I was saying, I want to look at those applications that are pending. So I want to limit applications by status. I'm just going to tell them to give me the pending applications in that briefcase. And I want to look at the likelihood of allowance after an RCE, or maybe, as I was talking earlier, what's the pre-appeal likelihood? So I want to know if we're going to win on pre-appeal. And what I do is I just set up that monitor. I go ahead and turn that monitor on. And I'm not going to go through the entire process here while everybody's on the phone, but once that monitor's on, so now I'm monitoring for my Sandbox Corporation here, and I would certainly label it of something that I understood and even have some text by it. I don't have an example of that, but I have some text by it, so I understood what I wanted to do. And now I know that here's the applications I want to quickly look at that may fit that same pattern. And maybe I do want to consider appeal because maybe this is a situation where I have a low allowance examiner that has a high likelihood of appeal success, but I know that I'm going to go very deep into prosecution to get to allowance, but maybe appeal's a shorter path to my allowance. So that allows me to monitor my clients' applications that I'm working on, or maybe even a larger data set of applications I'm working on for all of my clients. And I want to look at, I've just figured out one examiner always gives me that I'm not providing patentable weight. I'm not giving patentable weight to your non-functional descriptive argument. I want to see, are there other examiners doing that? I can start to set up these monitors to find the applications I want to see, and I want to see brought to my attention immediately. So I want to be able to dig deeper into that application and understand what I might be doing. So again, when I'm looking at it from your perspective, I'm looking at, I can create a number of briefcases, and these briefcases, again, are just a grouping of those applications. So a grouping of a set of applications that I want to do further analysis of. So I've taken those applications, whether those are applications I'm personally working on or applications I want to understand. Maybe I want to add new applications here, so it's as simple as adding that application or updating a list. I would then be able to add that. It won't let you allow add duplicates there, so it checks first to see if you have a duplicate. And then I can understand all the statistics of it. I can see what's happening here. How do I align to what typically happens inside the patent office at the art unit or at the examiner level or maybe at the tech center level? So how do we perform in these certain art units if I'm looking at it from a outside counsel perspective? And then what patterns do I want to monitor in this set of applications? What am I looking for? And lastly, I wanted to talk about the entire portfolio management. So I started here, but let me come back to this data visualization tool here and explore it a little bit more to help people look at the entire portfolio. So right now it's just showing me issued, abandoned, and pending here. Each box is one application, and if I hover over that box, it gives me a little bit of information about that application. But this is a quick way for me to do an entire analysis and drill into a set of applications I want to look at. And then I can always jump right over to the dashboard and look at all the statistics of those. So maybe I want to look at all the applications here that are with high allowance examiners, because I want to see, are we getting allowance, within average time with those examiners. So first, let's just take a look at all of our high allowance examiners. So I go ahead and run that search. I'm still looking at issued, abandoned, and pending. So I do see that I have 64 that are pending here, so that's an interesting data set. Let's just sort that out and just get to the pending ones. So now we're just looking at pending applications with examiners who have a high allowance rate. So and a lot of times high allowance rate, a lot of times they have a short pendency as well. Now we'd want to look at that, maybe even filter to that point, but that's an easy assumption to make. And maybe I want to look at too now, well, which one, how many office actions have we gone, or how far have we gone past what's typical for that examiner? So, have we gone deep into prosecution with these examiners who have a high allowance rate? It's 45 more below average. No surprise there. These were those examiners that moved to allowance quickly, or have a high percentage of allowance, I should say, not necessarily moved to allowance quickly, but a lot of times those go together. But maybe I just want to understand the data set then of the ones that are over average. So this 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 applications here. So just looking at the ones that are over that examiner average. So I want to then, sort and filter a little bit further here by everything that's one or more over. And I got to a data set now here that's very small, and I want to understand the statistics of that entire data set. So again, I've just sorted it now to my 9 applications that were over. If I wanted to look at any one application, I could go ahead and click there and look at those applications. But maybe it's important now for me to toggle over and look at the statistics of those applications and see what's happening. I can see, again, I sorted them only to pending, so no surprise that I just see the pending ones. And in this data set, I can find all the pending applications right here. And I could have just clicked on one of those boxes, but I want to see, what's happening with this application here. This one's of interest to me. I see it's on appeal here, but I just go ahead and click over and learn about that application. I clicked on the image file wrapper there, but here's the information about that application. And here's what's happening in the timeline. Now, looking at this application, we have an examiner who has an 83% allowance rate. So if I knew that here, could I have done something different with this application? Was there a different path to allowance that wouldn't have extended prosecution 7 years and ended up in this lengthy appeal process? Maybe that's the path it needed to take, but should I have appealed earlier than if I knew I was past the examiner's average and I would appeal earlier? So power of the data is understanding it as soon as that examiner is assigned, and you're seeing what may happen and getting to know a little bit more here about John Eric Morales, who has an 83% allowance rate. How does John fit inside of his art unit? Is this an art unit where many have a high allowance rating, or is he an anomaly to that art unit? So I'm able to uncover all of that information and maybe take different paths for my client. So I want to just kind of stop here and summarize, and then we'll take some time for some questions. But what we wanted to look at today is we wanted to look at the prosecution and looking at that prosecution maze. And so how we've looked at that is we've looked at a dashboard of statistics. So we've looked at that for any one application, any examiner, an entire art unit or a tech center, or any data set that was of interest to us. We're able to take a look at that dashboard. We're able to then create an alignment report. So let's understand how that data set is doing versus everyone else in context of the patent office. So how everyone else is doing with a certain examiner or with a certain art unit. Able to monitor for the future of everything that's happening with this data set. I want to see if these patterns are happening, and I want to see if maybe I can find other paths to allowance with examiners who have similar patterns. And I want to look at the entire portfolio. That was this visual exploration tool. I want to look at certain things inside, and I want to learn about risk management. Maybe I just want to look at how often we file for extension of time and how frequently that's happening and what percentage of the applications, knowing that it's inevitable sometimes, but could we work on that? Could we see that that'd be a better path for our clients and a lower cost? Maybe a lot of times our firm eats that cost. So could we work more effectively somewhere and not have continually looking at that? So I can look at that from that entire portfolio view. So entire portfolio view, all of my statistics, how it aligns, and monitoring that moving forward is looking at the applications. So let me jump back here now. I'm going to scroll to the end. This deck is certainly available if you have further interest or want to talk a little bit more about specifics of your applications or a client that you're looking at. I want to put up this last slide if there's any questions, and I'm going to turn it back over to Allie. There's my contact information. Aaron is very accessible and maybe a little bit easier to get a hold of, as I am often doing things like this or meeting with our prospects and our clients, but certainly feel free to drop me an email or give me a call or reach out to Aaron directly, and Aaron can get you in contact with the right people to answer those questions. Allie, is there any questions that came in through chat that we want to address?
Yep, there are a few, and if anybody still has questions, please feel free to send them via chat to Allie Morton, and we'll get those read. Or if you would like to ask the question live, you can hit *6 to unmute yourself. We received a couple questions around how often the system is updated, so I'll just kind of group them together into one category of the timing, and then the specifics around it. So the question is, how does the software get this data? Is it the same as the bulk data that Reed hosts for the Patent Office or some other data set? The context for the question is from the trigger point of view. For example, if you get an office action mailed, when would it be reflected in the software? Sure.
So our software is constantly updating itself with through the Patent Office and other data sources that we have to keep that information up to date. But we've created an algorithm that looks at every single application, predicts what's going to happen so that we know when to go update that application. So our goal is to always keep those pending applications up to date within 60 days, and we're monitoring for that every day. And when we work with our current clients, we work on a pattern to, We work with that client to identify how frequently we want to keep that up to date. Maybe our client wants to run a custom report here at the end of a quarter and wants to make sure all of their applications are 100% current. We go ahead and update all of those applications for that client and run that report. So we have some flexibility there. But in general, how I would answer that is that we're working to always keep it up to date, knowing that if you file an office action today, nothing's going to happen with that application tomorrow. So we're probably not going to update that application tomorrow, but we might update that application in 30 days and start to update that application more frequently. So we certainly have a method to keep them all up to date and make sure that all of those applications stay current, stay up to date, so that you can have good business analysis out of these statistics.
Okay, great. Another question is, you talked about briefcasing. Are you able to create briefcases for current clients in target accounts?
Yes. So if you're looking at the briefcasing feature, you're able to create any data set that you want in the briefcase. So let me just toggle back over here to look at a briefcase. If I'm looking at any briefcase, I can create any data set I want to analyze that data set further. So maybe I'm looking at a current client, or maybe I'm looking at some competitive information. I can group those into a data set. And I guess jumping back to our other question, I should have shown everyone the dynamic update side of it. Let me see if I have one update. So right here, I can always go and look and see how frequently something's been updated. So I can see this one was last updated on 10/14. If I want to check and see if there's any application, I can just go ahead and tell it to go ahead and update it. And as soon as we have the bandwidth to update that, this one's been put on the top of the list, it'll update, and then it'll just pop up and give me an answer that it's been updated. So I can look all the way down to one application to see when that update happened. So that was back to the first question, I'm sorry. And the second question was that portfolios, and you can add any briefcases or data sets to look at in the briefcasing feature.
Perfect. The other question that we have, again, if anybody has any, feel free to send in via chat or hit *6 to unmute yourself. The last question I have here is, have you seen any actual reductions in office actions with clients using PatentAdvisor?
Yeah, great question. What we always talk about with clients is based on the case studies that we've done with clients and looking at a 20% reduction in office actions by using data-driven prosecution. And that's looking at things, for example, like we show with those examiners that have that higher allowance rate. Can we be more aggressive and move to allowance earlier and still maintain quality? Or those examiners that have a low allowance rate and we're going to end up appealing anyways, maybe we want to move that appeal strategy up. And maybe that's the only path to allowance. And rather than uncovering that one office action at a time and taking maybe 2 or 3 years to uncover that that's the right path, looking at them statistically to understand that that may be our only path to allowance and that we want to get our application ready for appeal early on and aggressively appeal early on and look at things like the pre-appeal strategy, or look at things like I don't want it to go back into prosecution because I see that the pattern is this examiner always pushes it back into prosecution. So if they do push me back into prosecution, quickly getting back into appeal because I want to get that application all the way to the board because I know that the pattern for that examiner is to typically send me back into prosecution and then I'm just in a vicious circle. And I know that I'm going to then extend prosecution longer than, say, my client wants to and not be effective with my prosecution. So hopefully that addresses the question of looking at, has a client seen actual reductions? It's easy to look at the past and look at the applications and say, could you take a different path? That's initially the way that you look at it and say, was there other paths to allowance if I statistically knew this? But in our case studies, we have been able to show that our clients have been able to reduce office actions and see different paths to allowance. So if there's any other questions that have come in by chat, or if anyone has any live questions, we can certainly take those now, or let me toggle back to the question page here to give everybody contact information if you have further questions.
One last question that came in, and we can just address it at a high level, understanding that there's always specifics based on the firms themselves, is could you address anything around the pricing?
Yeah, great question. It's going to be different by firm, but how we build our pricing model out is based on modules as well as firm size, so prosecuting attorneys. So looking at the number of prosecuting attorneys, looking at how we're going to utilize the application, and looking at our relationship with that firm. How can we bring this application to them to utilize it efficiently and effectively to reach their goals? So I guess that's a very high-level answer versus some specifics, but if we want to get into some additional specifics, please feel free to reach out to me, and we can discuss your firm a little more in detail and get to those numbers fairly quickly. Okay, we still have some questions coming in. This question is around onboarding and what training is available for new users of PatentAdvisor. Yeah, so we have many levels of training. So the first is more of a recorded training and implementation. So, if that's what you need to get started, you want to start using the prosecution tools and you just need a basic understanding to do that. We certainly have that methodology all the way through on-site training and implementation. So, for example, we want to set up those initial briefcases of data sets that you want to look at. We maybe want to set up custom analysis or two from a reporting standpoint because there's certain data sets that you want to understand deeper. And we want you to have us come and train live, 20 of the prosecuting attorneys at your firm that are going to utilize this tool. Certainly run the full gamut of implementation, training, and onboarding, again, from a simple online tutorial all the way through on-site and in-depth training and implementation.
Great. That takes care of all the questions that have come in via the chat. As we're finalizing here and wrapping up, please feel free to hit *6 to unmute. If you want to ask anything else, like Matt said, please feel free to reach out to Matt or Aaron. And with any more detailed questions or anything that you think of after the fact, thank you all again for attending, and thank you, Matt, for a great presentation.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
To set up or join a submeeting, press the pound or hash key, followed by any number 1 through 9. To rejoin the main meeting, press the pound or hash key twice. To cancel submeetings, press the pound or hash key and 0.